Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsay, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of SuperPsyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. SuperPsyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. All right, my friends, I am a huge fan of collecting brainy quotes that can change my life. And I thought I'd share 5 that came to my mind immediately of great brainy quotes that have, in fact, changed my life. Let's start off with one of them that changed my life immediately. I even remember the year I heard it. It was 2007. And it was simply, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. I'll say that again. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. It's apparently attributable to Stephen Covey. Others may be responsible for it as well. But this is a really good sorting process. Oftentimes, there are so many things on our plate and so many options and so many opportunities and so many things that seem interesting, especially with these blue lights from our mobile phones that are calling to us to go onto social media and waste our heartbeats and our eyeballs on them. And if we ask ourselves, is this really part of the main thing? In my case, I have basically 3 main things, and it really helps me keep my attention on point. The 3 main things that I have are my family, my work, and my community. My family includes the 4 in my home as well as my extended family. I will do just about anything for them. The next ring is my profession. I care deeply about becoming a better psychologist. One of the reasons that I even have this episode is not only to disseminate information to you that can be useful, but every time I speak to a really smart person on my podcast, it upgrades my software and firmware so I'm able to provide better therapy to the people who come and trust me with their psyches. So the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And of course, my community matters very much. This community includes my friends, it includes my local community, as well as other aspects of people whom I refer to as community. The second quote that I'm going to bring forth, this one comes from the great psychoanalyst, previously a pediatrician from Great Britain, Donald Winnicott. He is famous for having come up with the idea of the good enough parent and the good enough child and so many other contributions. The more you geek out to Donald Winnicott's work, everything he dropped that I've ever seen has been gold. I have not yet seen anything that I've disagreed with, but here is one of these moments. I got this one from a colleague of mine, Dr. Hugh Grubb, who shared this with me, and I remember my jaw just about hitting the floor when he said it. But here's how it goes. A sign of health in the mind is the ability of one individual to enter imaginatively and accurately into the thoughts and feelings and hopes and fears of another person, to allow the other person to do the same for us. So the way it was said to me was a more condensed version. Simply, a sign of good mental health is one's ability to listen and hear the experiences of another and to share their experiences with another, that upload and download. I don't know about you, but I'm sure you've been on the other side of a cup of coffee with someone who just blabbed at you and had no interest in hearing about you. Or perhaps you might have been somewhat vulnerable with the other person, shared of yourself, and the other person shared nothing with you. This is showing that a really good sign of mental health is the ability of us to be able to share and take in. And I think that's amazing. What a profound contribution from Dr. Winnicott. I'm forever grateful for that quote. All right, a few more. This one came through Guy Kawasaki. I was hosting a TEDx event in Palo Alto, and he dropped this nugget, and I just will never forget it. He shared it also on my podcast if you want to check it out. But he basically said, don't focus on making the right decision. Focus instead on making the decision right. I'll say it again. Don't focus on making the right decision. Focus instead on making the decision right. Most decisions we make are alterable, unless it's kind of a one-way door decision, like an amputation of a body part. That's not something we can correct. But most of life's decisions can be altered or reversed. And I think Guy Kawasaki's idea of really honing in on making the decision right takes a lot of the pressure and perfectionism out of making the right decision. How often have we just spent too many hours trying to make a decision? Of course, there are some decisions you definitely got to make right, but most decisions we can change course after they've been made. Teddy Roosevelt once said something akin to, the best thing we can do is make the right decision. The second best thing we can do is make the wrong decision. And the worst thing we can do is make no decision. The most downloaded episode in my nearly 300 episodes to date has been that with Dr. Barry Schwartz. Barry, for those of you who don't know his unbelievably good work, he's a professor at Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, formerly at Swarthmore. He also has written a book called The Paradox of Choice, in which he describes that sometimes when we have too many choices, it can actually be a befuddling process. And although we may be able to optimize, or I'm forgetting the exact word that he uses in terms of making the perfect choice, generally speaking, if we have three viable options and we choose the best of those three, we have what he calls satisficing. This is a really key distinction, because the difference between choosing between three viable options and over 100 options, the differences are not justified by the amount of time they tend to take. So the idea that Guy Kawasaki shares with us about focusing on making the decision right is, to my eyes and ears, consistent with what Teddy Roosevelt and Barry Schwartz say. So brilliant idea, really, really helpful. I hear about so many folks in my office driven by perfectionistic tendencies. I myself have been known to be perfectionistic, and over the years, I've really worked hard to shed that from me and to make decisions more quickly, and realize that most of my decisions I can pivot after having made them. It's been really useful, and it's been a great anti-procrastination tool. The fourth quote I'll share with you is, there can be a chasm between what we know and what we do. Sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and they'll tell me about, well, I already know that. And I'll ask, well, are you doing what you know to do? There can be, common sense is not necessarily common practice. The things that we know, sometimes we don't apply them. And I think it's a really important distinction. Actually applying what you know sounds super simple, sounds like something you'd hear, Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins describing to some children. But so many of the things that we learned in childhood, we fail to apply. So this would be one of those things that I would just remind you. Ask yourself, do an inventory. Am I actually doing what I know to do? There are so many areas in my own life where I am working on improving this function. The fifth this one will come from Zach Gottlieb. He is still a teenager. He is one of my favorite thought leaders. He's a 19-year-old young man currently studying at Stanford. When I interviewed him on my podcast, he was a high schooler who had come up with a website called Talk with Zach. And he basically said something so brilliant. I just wished he had been my friend in high school. But he said, we can't change what we don't talk about. I'll repeat that. We can't change what we don't talk about. That is so important. We are loath to talk about things because of shame and embarrassment and social comparison, a whole bunch of other reasons why we don't share. Of course, embarrassment is a common one. But if we don't talk about things, it's really hard to change them. This quote is attributable to many people, the one I'm about to share, that relates to Zach's great quote, and that is, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. Many people have said it, but I referred to Kettering. But there are so many other ideas that kind of relate to Zach's wisdom here. We need to name things to tame things. We have to feel it to heal it. There was a quote that was conveyed to me by Dr. Hugh Reidelhuber, a great psychiatrist whose memory is now a blessing. He said something that was attributable to Confucius, something along the lines of, all wisdom comes from the accuracy in naming things. I just love that idea. I remember, for those of you who can see the video of this episode, there is a tiny box behind me. It contains the cremated remains of the cat who I took care of and who was the first of felines who I actually really came to love. I used to hate cats, and that's a whole story unto itself. I talked about it in my book. But anyway, his name was Yoda. And at one point, I realized he had a terrible medical conundrum. He had a hypoimmune disorder in the form of feline HIV. It was called FIV, feline immunodeficiency virus. And he had a hyperimmune disorder of asthma as well as cancer. And I was trying to figure out, how in the world do I help this cat who I adore? Well, I spent several hours writing out what was going on, and I defined the problem. So along the lines of, we can't change what we don't talk about, or all wisdom comes from the accuracy in naming things, or a problem well defined is a problem half solved, that actually helped me come up with a good treatment plan that allowed Yoda to have more quality time and more quantity time on the planet. Both the quality and the quantity were mutually dependent. Let's just be clear. I was not going to let him suffer. But yeah, I just love these quotes. You know what? I'm going to add a sixth, just as a little bonus. The one that I would have my children repeat in the car on the way to school at some point during the drive. And that was, repetition is the mother of mastery. I got this one from, I believe, Tony Robbins, not personally, but from his speaking. And I would corroborate this. This has been one of the most important things in my life, whether it's come to me understanding how to do math really well and fast, or learning foreign languages, or learning to become a better therapist. Repetition is the mother of mastery. My kids have had to say that. They had to say the main thing quote many times. I really wanted to drill this into them at a very young age, because I knew that if they learned these ideas at a young age, that they would be able to use them with compounding interest over the years. So I hope these quotes are useful to you. I hope they change your life in the way they've changed mine. And once again, as always, thanks for listening. This is Dr. Adam Dorsay thanking you for listening to SuperPsyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe